We stand above Lisbon at first light on the 1st of November, 1755. All Saints' Day has begun. The Tagus River lies wide and still, a sheet of molten gold catching the first rays of the sun. Across its surface, the city climbs 7 steep hills in terraces of whitewashed walls and warm terracotta roofs. Church towers more than 30 rise like sentinels, their bells silent for the moment. A thin mist drifts upward from the lower slopes, softening the edges of the rooftops, making the whole place seem to float between water and sky. Down on the quays, the harbor is already awake. 300 ships ride at anchor. Tall Indiamen with weathered hulls, squat Brazilian sugar traders, slender caravels from the African coast. Crates swing on ropes. Canvas flaps in the light breeze. Sailors in striped shirts and bare feet haul ropes and roll barrels, while dockworkers shout in Portuguese laced with African and Tupi words. The air carries salt tar, wet rope, and the faint sweetness of cinnamon drifting from open holds. We descend into the streets. Cobblestones gleam with the night's dampness. Families move toward the churches in their Sunday best silk shawls for the wives of merchants, clean linen for fishermen's households, black veils for widows. Children dart between legs, chasing one another with laughter that echoes off high walls. The first bell tolls, deep and slow. Then another answers, and another, until the city is wrapped in a slow bronze chorus that rolls across the hills and out over the river. Markets unfold along the Rua Nova dos Mercadores. Stalls grown under mounds of oranges from the Algarve, pineapples from Brazil, bolts of Indian calico, sacks of Malabar pepper. Vendors call prices in rising cadences. The scent of fresh baked bread mixes with wood smoke, roasted chestnuts, and the clean salt tang that never quite leaves the air near the Tagus. In shadowed workshops, artisans bend over anvils, hammers ringing in steady rhythm. Women balance clay jars on their heads and walk in single file to the fountains, water spilling in bright arcs. Boys kick a rag ball down narrow lanes where the houses lean so close overhead that neighbors can speak without raising their voices. The great convents and palaces stand open to the morning. Their facades are clothed in intricate azulejo, tiles blue and white patterns of ships and vines, and distant cities gleaming softly in the climbing light. Gentle waves lap at the stone quays. Gulls wheel above the masts. A light wind moves the mist higher, revealing the full sweep of the city. Lisbon breathes. It moves. It prays. In this quiet hour, before the bells reach their full voice, the capital of an empire feels complete, as though time itself has paused to admire what human hands and faith have built together. We enter the royal palace at Terreiro do Passo as the morning sun climbs higher. Marble floors reflect the light in long pale stripes. Advisors in black velvet stand in small circles, maps unrolled across heavy tables, voices low. They speak of fleets, of monsoon winds, of the price of cloves in Goa and the yield of sugar in Pernambuco. At the center of every conversation lies one unspoken truth. Lisbon is the beating heart of the greatest seaborne empire the world has yet seen. Portugal is small. A narrow ribbon of land on the western edge of Europe, no larger than a single province of France. Yet from this modest shore, the Portuguese have drawn lines across every ocean. The empire stretches from the mouth of the Amazon to the spice islands of the Moluccas, from the Gold Coast of Africa to the trading factories of Bengal. Lisbon is the single knot where all these threads meet. We see the roots now, glowing across animated charts. Curved arcs of sail that begin in the Tagus, round the Cape of Good Hope, cross the Indian Ocean, touch Malacca, then return laden with nutmeg, silk, porcelain. Other lines swing west past the Azores to Brazil, where gold and diamonds pour into the Royal Fifth. Still others reach down the African coast to Angola and Mozambique, where human beings are loaded as cargo for the plantations of the New World. Every voyage ends here, in the wide basin of the Tagus, where the river itself seems swollen with wealth. The port never rests. Galleons and carracks crowd the anchorage, their decks piled with crates stamped with the royal arms. Stevedores haul chests of Brazilian gold dust, barrels of Malagueta pepper, bundles of elephant tusks, rolls of Indian cotton dyed the deep red of cochineal. Customs officers move among them, quills scratching ledgers that record fortunes in reis and cruzados. Inland, caravans depart at dusk, mules straining under silk and spices, bound for the markets of Madrid, Paris, London, Amsterdam. In the palace halls, nobles gather for the evening banquet. Silk coats shimmer under candlelight. Tapestries cover the wall scenes of Vasco da Gama kneeling before the Zamorin of Calicut, of Albuquerque storming Ormuz, of the cross planted on the shores of Brazil. The men who wear these histories on their sleeves control an empire that supplies half the gold and much of the spice that circulates through Europe. Lisbon's population approaches 200,000, souls larger than Venice, rivaling Amsterdam, though smaller than Paris or London. Yet no other city matches its concentration of colonial treasure. The Royal Mint strikes coins from Brazilian gold at a rate that keeps the Portuguese crown solvent while other crowns borrow. The Casa da India, the royal trading house, holds monopoly rights over half the world's commerce in pepper, cinnamon, and diamonds. We see the comparison now side by side on this map. Amsterdam's tight ring of canals fed by Baltic grain and East India Company profits. Venice's lagoon still drawing silk from the Levant. Paris swelling with courtiers and artisans. Lisbon stands apart. It is not merely wealthy. It is the hinge between continents, the place where the wealth of four worlds flows through a single narrow river mouth. In this hour, the palace hums with confidence. The empire is secure. The gold continues to arrive. The spices arrive. The ships arrive. And Lisbon believes it always will. We move through the lower streets as the morning advances. In the Baixa, the alleys are so narrow that sunlight reaches the ground only at noon. Wooden houses rise 4 and 5 stories, their upper floors jutting out until they nearly touch across the lane. Inside these dim spaces, families crowd around small tables lit by single candles. Bread is torn by hand. A pot of fish stew simmers over a charcoal brazier. Children sleep on straw pallets pushed against the wall. The air is thick with the smell of damp stone, olive oil, and the faint sourness of unwashed bodies living too close together. Higher up the hills, the mansions stand apart. Their salons open to terraces that command views of the river. Servants in livery move silently, pouring wine into crystal glasses, arranging silver trays of candied fruits and pastries dusted with sugar from Madeira. Ladies in silk gowns embroidered with gold thread converse in low voices, while gentlemen in powdered wigs discuss the latest dispatches from Rio de Janeiro. Paintings cover the walls portraits of ancestors who sailed with da Gama, landscapes of Brazilian plantations glowing under a tropical sun. A harpsichord plays in the corner, delicate notes floating over the murmur of polite laughter. Down in the streets the city kneels. All Saints' Day processions wind between the churches. Clergy in embroidered vestments carry reliquaries under canopies of gold cloth. Behind them, the faithful follow in ranks, nobles first, then merchants, then artisans, then the poor. Incense drifts in blue clouds. Voices rise in Latin chants that echo off stone facades. In the cathedrals, candles burn by the thousand before altars of silver and marble, their light dancing across statues of saints whose eyes seem to watch every bowed head. At midday, the taverns fill. Sailors fresh from the Indies sit shoulder to shoulder with local fishermen, sharing jugs of Vinho Verde and stories of storms off the Cape. A woman with a guitar sings a slow, mournful song that speaks of love lost at sea. The room falls quiet, then answers with soft clapping. In the markets, the languages blend Portuguese, Arabic, Congo, Tupi while hands exchange coins for nutmeg, ivory combs, printed calico from Surat. Yet the city leans. Many houses rest on shallow footings driven into the same soft earth that once lined the riverbed. Wooden beams groan under the weight of added stories. In the lower quarters, open gutters carry waste toward the Tagus. When rain comes, the streets turn to black rivers that smell of rot. Rickety footbridges span the ravines between hills, swaying when too many cross at once. Fishermen mend nets on the quays at dawn, their fingers quick and calloused. Across the city, in small academies lit by tall windows, scholars bend over books of Newton and Locke, debating the motion of planets and the rights of man in measured tones. No one connects the two worlds. No one speaks of the small tremors that sometimes rattle windows and shift roof tiles, brief shutters the people dismiss as the sigh of an old city settling. In the evening, a street singer stands beneath a lantern, voice low and rough, singing of Sada doth the ache for what is gone or never was. Listeners pause, coins drop into his hat, then the crowd moves on. Lisbon lives in these quiet divisions. Splendor above, hardship below, faith everywhere, the earth beneath it all, patient and silent, holding its breath. The bells are still ringing when it begins. Inside the churches, All Saints' Day Mass has reached the elevation of the host. Thousands kneel on stone floors. Candles stand in rows before golden altars, flames steady in the incense-thick air. Then the first tremor arrives, not violent, only a low, rolling shudder that rattles the chalices and makes the candlelight dip once, twice. Heads lift. A few worshippers glance toward the vaults. The priests continue. Most return to prayer. The tremor fades. 30 seconds later, the earth answers again. This time the rumble deepens into a roar that comes from everywhere and nowhere. Stone floors heave like the deck of a ship in storm. Pillars sway. Arches crack with the sound of breaking bone. Candles topple. Wax spills. In the Cathedral of San Domingos, the great rose window shatters. Colored glass rains onto the congregation below. Screams rise, sharp and sudden, swallowed almost at once by the thunder beneath the city. Outside, the streets become living things. Cobblestones buckle and split. Walls lean outward, then inward. Wooden houses groan as beams twist free of their mortise. Balconies tear away and fall in slow, terrible arcs. People stumble into the open squares, clutching children, rosaries, nothing at all. Faces turn upward as though the sky itself might explain what the ground refuses to hold still. The shaking lasts 3 minutes in which Lisbon tears itself apart. The royal palace at Terreiro do Passo trembles, its marble staircase cracking from top to bottom. The new opera house, pride of the court, collapses in a single cataract of stone and timber. Dust clouds bloom upward, thick and white, blotting the sun. Convents fold inward. Their tiled roofs slide down hillsides in avalanches of red clay. In the Baixa, the narrow lanes become death traps. Upper stories crash onto lower ones, burying families who had only just stepped out of their doorways. Clergy stand in the ruins of their churches, arms raised, voices straining to be heard over the din, calling the people to repentance, to prayer. Some listen. Most run. Mothers drag children through falling debris. Men claw at piles of masonry, shouting names into the dust. Horses scream, trapped beneath overturned carriages. The bells, those that still hang, toll wildly, out of rhythm, as though the towers themselves are crying out. Add headings, format paragraph styles, and they will appear in your table of contents. Then silence falls. A false quiet. The shaking stops. People rise from where they have fallen. They look at one another, stunned, waiting for the next blow. Some begin to move toward the river, drawn by instinct to the open space of the Tagus. The water is low, unnaturally low. The riverbed lies exposed far beyond the normal tide line, mudflats glistening, fish flapping in sudden shallows. Ships list sideways on the mud, keels grounded. A murmur spreads through the crowd. Someone points. Far out in the estuary, the sea gathers itself into a long, dark ridge. The first wave comes without warning. It rears up, 30 feet high, a wall of green water that swallows the horizon. It strikes the quays with a sound like cannon fire. Ships are lifted, snapped in half, thrown inland like toys. The wave surges through the lower city, sweeping people, horses, carriages, entire market stalls into its embrace. Water races up the streets, black with mud and wreckage, carrying screams that are cut off as suddenly as they begin. Thousands are caught in the open squares. They vanish beneath the flood. Those who cling to rooftops or upper windows watch as the water rises to meet them, then recedes, dragging bodies and debris back toward the river in a churning undertow. Fires begin almost at once. Candles overturned in churches, cooking hearths spilled in fallen houses. The wooden districts most of the city tinder. Flames leap from beam to beam, from roof to roof. Smoke rises in thick pillars, then merges into a pall that darkens the afternoon sky. Aftershocks follow, each one smaller, but sharp, toppling walls already weakened, sending fresh clouds of dust and sparks into the burning air. In the flooded streets, survivors cling to floating timbers. A woman holds a child above the water, her arms locked, face blank with shock. A man calls for his wife across the wreckage. Voices rise and fall in the smoke prayers, curses, names repeated like litanies. The city that was Lisbon is now a landscape of ruined, broken towers, burning hills, water, and fire claiming what the earth has left. The day is not yet over, and the ground still trembles beneath what remains. When the fires have burned for 3 days and the aftershocks grow weaker, a terrible stillness settles over Lisbon. The city is unrecognizable. Where palaces and convents stood, only smoldering heaps remain, blackened stone piled upon blackened stone, marble cracked and veined with soot. The skyline, once pierced by 30 church towers, is fractured and low. Most spires have fallen, leaving jagged stumps against a sky choked with smoke. The Tagus flows on, indifferent, its water still carrying the last of the wreckage downstream. Survivors move through the ruins like ghosts. Men and women, Faces gray with ash and grief dig with bare hands or broken timbers. They call names into the silence. Maria, João, and a voice is hoarse, repeating the sesame signdal ash shinalb thins to nothing. A mother kneels beside a collapsed doorway, rocking slowly, her child's shoe clutched in her lap. Others simply stand, staring at places where their homes used to be, as though waiting for the stones to remember them. Estimates will come later, but the scale is already clear. Between 30 and 60,000 souls perished in the first minutes, in the hours of fire and flood that followed. Whole families vanished beneath falling walls. Entire neighborhoods, the Baixa, the Alfama slopes were erased. The Royal Library, the Jesuit College, the archives of the Casa da India, all consumed. Thousands of books, manuscripts, maps that trace the roots of empire turned to ash. Paintings of saints and kings, silver altars, gilded reliquaries gone. The cultural memory of a nation, accumulated over centuries, reduced to charred fragments scattered across the hills. In the open fields beyond the city walls, the living gather. They camp beneath blankets strung between olive trees, afraid to return to any roof that still stands. Aftershocks still come, sharp and sudden. Each one sends fresh panic through the crowds. People huddle in small groups, sharing water from shared buckets, sharing stories in low voices. A sailor describes the wave that took his ship and half the key. A widow speaks of her husband pulled under by falling beams. The tales circle, repeated, as though speaking them might make the loss finite. Most sit in silence, eyes distant, hands clasped around knees or rosaries. Mass graves appear along the outskirts. Priests, those who survived, walk in slow procession, leading carts piled with bodies wrapped in whatever cloth could be found. No coffins, no names carved in stone. The ground is opened in long trenches. Earth is shoveled back quickly. No one lingers. The living must keep moving. The markets are empty now. Once the Rua Nova dos Mercadores rang with voices and the clink of coins. Today, scattered oranges rot among ash. Bolts of calico lie sodden and torn. A single brass scale tips over in the wind. The port is a graveyard of broken masts and splintered hulls. The river carries on, quiet as though nothing has changed. Night falls. Fires still burn in pockets, their glow the only light over the desolation. The survivors do not sleep deeply. They wait for the next tremor, the next wave that never comes. The city that believed itself blessed has been taught otherwise. What remains is not merely ruin. It is absence. The absence of voices, of bells, of the ordinary hours that once measured a life. Lisbon is silent now, and in that silence the weight of what has been lost settles, heavy and permanent, upon those who still breathe. We return to the hills above Lisbon in the months that follow. The fires have died to embers. The river runs clear again, yet the city remains a wound-blackened stone, empty squares, silence where bells once rang. Into this silence steps Sebastián José de Carvalho y Melo, soon to be known as the Marquis of Pombal. Appointed chief minister by a shaken king, he walks the ruins with cold purpose. No tears. No prayers for the past, only orders. Clearance begins at once. Workers in ragged lines haul away debris by the cartload. Rubble is carried to the river and dumped, extending the shoreline. Surveyors stake out new lines across the leveled Baixa. The old medieval tangle of narrow, twisting lanes is erased. In its place comes a rational grid, wide, straight avenues, uniform blocks, open plazas designed to break the path of flame and give men room to breathe when the earth moves again. The new buildings rise with deliberate caution. Wooden, cage-flexible frames of oak and chestnut hidden inside stone facades. These Gial Pombalinas, as they come to be called, allow structures to sway without shattering. Arches are shallower. Foundations deeper. Ornament is stripped away. Plain neoclassical lines replace the old Baroque excess. The result is austere, almost severe, but it is built to endure. Voltaire, in his study in Fernie, receives the first reports. He writes of Lisbon in letters that cross Europe, a city destroyed in 6 minutes, tens of thousands buried beneath their own altars. He asks why a benevolent God would permit such cruelty on a feast day of saints. The question echoes through salons in Paris, Geneva, Berlin. Answers with faith in nature's order. Kant turns the event into a meditation on the limits of reason. The earthquake becomes the great scandal of the Enlightenment moment, when optimism falters, when men begin to look less to divine will and more to human ingenuity. Years pass. The Baixa is reborn. Marble columns rise along the Rua Augusta. A triumphal arch frames the view to the river. In Terreiro do Passo, now called Praça do Comércio, the royal palace is not rebuilt. Instead, the square opens to the Tagus, a gesture of humility before the sea that once claimed so much. Monuments appear quietly. A column here, an inscription there, reminders without ostentation. Today, when we look at Lisbon, the overlay is clear. 18th century streets still guide the modern city. The same grid carries traffic. The same wide avenues allow light to reach the ground. The same anti-seismic logic, refined over centuries, protects new towers and ancient walls alike. The city has grown around its scars, not despite them. What remains is a quiet lesson. Empires rise on the faith that their works are permanent. Cities believe themselves favored by geography, by history, by heaven. Then the ground shifts, the sea rises, the fire spreads sand, everything built by hand is reminded of its fragility. Yet from the same ground men return. They measure, they plan, they build again, wiser if not braver. Lisbon stands as proof, not of divine mercy, not of human triumph, but of something simpler and more stubborn. The earth will always move, and we will always rebuild.